In this Tech Field Day update, we are going to be talking about SecureX, a little bit of what's new in SecureX, and a little bit about what's new in general. The specific things we're going to do a brief overview to SecureX for those of you who are not already familiar. We're going to talk about XDR. What is it? Why is it? How does it relate to SecureX, if in fact it does? We're going to talk about some integrations improvements that we've made for the process of bringing third-party intelligence and capabilities into your SecureX portfolio. We're going to talk about some new orchestration workflows that have been released that really highlight some of the primary features of the entire orchestration engine. And I'm going to leave you with some resources and a bit of parting thoughts to keep you learning more after this session is over. There are a lot of things that we need to cover today. We're going to start with this overview, but I am going to ask our participants to hold off until the end of the session, when I will, not the end of the session, the end of the section, when I'll ask if there are any questions about what I've covered so far. The reason SecureX even exists is that in the 30-some-odd year history of the computer security industry, we have made a lot of things better, but we haven't always made things easier. We've got over 3,000 vendors now in the cybersecurity space. We've got organizations where your SOC might have 75 different security tools that they have to know how to use, they have to leverage, they have to be able to transition from one to the other smoothly, adapting mental models, code switching in their head between what does this product call a thing, or what does that product call the same thing. And a lot of people, 80% of our CISOs, 79% of our CISOs that we interviewed said that it's difficult to orchestrate across all of the alerts that all these products are generating. And in a lot of environments, I'm going to go out on a limb and say in just about every environment, a lot of the alerts that their security tools generate for them just get ignored because there simply aren't cycles to be able to process all of them because of the complexity of the task. You need a firewall, you buy a firewall. You need an endpoint security agent, you buy an endpoint security agent. You need web security, you need email security, you need VPN solutions. You need all of these things, and every one of them addresses the specific problem quite well, I like to think, in general, but they don't necessarily work well together. And so we rolled out SecureX, which is cloud native. It's hosted in the cloud. You don't have to deploy it. You don't have to worry about ops costs or anything. It's built in, however, to the Cisco security products you've already got. If you have a Cisco security product, you have access to SecureX for the most part. We're about 2/3 there, but we have SecureX capabilities of some kind planned for every Cisco security product that exists. But not only that, we're tying into your existing third-party architecture as well, because we want one of the benefits of being a Cisco security customer to be not only do your Cisco security tools all work well together, as you should be able to reasonably expect that they would from the same vendor, but also that even your third-party tools work better together as a result of you having some Cisco security devices in your stack. And we're unlocking value for your organization by bringing you all of the capabilities of your deployed security portfolio into one place, by bringing you all of the intelligence they generate or consume into one place, by bringing their response capabilities together into one place. This gives you increased simplicity. You do not have to jump between product to product anymore to perform a simple single task. We're bringing it all into one location so that you can see at a glance what's happened no matter what technology detected that part of the attack chain through your environment. And we're giving you maximized operational efficiency by allowing you, in many cases, automate and orchestrate a lot of this behavior so that you don't even need to do it. It takes about 15 minutes to set up for any one Cisco security product. And customers say that over time, they end up saving between 50 and 80% of their time that it takes to accomplish typical security tasks like detecting an attack or responding to an attack, mitigating it against future attacks. That is a huge time savings. And you know, team is not sitting for the other half to 85% of the time, because it was safe. You're able to do more things. So we're unlocking value in your technologies by allowing them to benefit from the intelligence and the response capabilities and the control capabilities that those products have across the portfolio. And we're bringing value to your people by allowing them to get more done without you having to invest in additional people or even in additional technologies, because, I haven't mentioned this yet, but SecureX is actually free. If you have a Cisco security product that has SecureX capabilities, you gain access to the SecureX platform at no additional cost. I'm going to walk you through what this can look like. You're reading a blog. In this example, it's the Talos blog. And you scroll through the length of the Talos blog and you find indicators of compromise. Now, in the Talos blog, because we know how people use this kind of thing, we put them all in one place at the end. Many blogs don't do that. But so you scroll through the article, you see these IOCs at the bottom, you take this one, and you go search for it in all of the technologies you have that can detect a URL of this sort. Maybe your endpoint security agent, maybe a web proxy of some kind, firewalls, anywhere that can detect URLs, you're going to check the logs of that device and see if it detected this one. And then you're going to do it again. And you're going to go down the list and continue to do this. For every item in the list, you're going to check all of your technologies to see if they saw that one. And you're going to check all of them in series. And you have to do this across the entirety of the list that's included in any resource that you're looking at. Or you can be a SecureX user and you can have the SecureX plugin available in your browser. You're going to hit that button in the browser. It's going to open a menu. You're going to select the button to find observables in this article. And without even having to read the article yourself, it's going to give you this list. It submitted this article to the SecureX engine on the back end, and it's now given you this list sorted and marked for the disposition of each observable. And off of each of these things, you can then select a checkbox, or you can just select all using the categories, and you can pivot very easily into an investigation. We're not going to investigate snort.org because we see that it has a clean disposition. We're going to click the investigate button, and we see in one place everything that all of our technologies detected about the set of observables that we fed into the investigation engine. We see that we have 3 targets. We see that we have these 3 devices in our network that had some kind of interaction with something in that investigation. And because of the graph, we can tell very easily what it was that they had those kinds of interactions with. We see that 6 modules contributed to this investigation. And if you click the button, we can see which 6 they are and what they contributed. We see all of this in one place, and we have the opportunity to take all of these actions in one place on any of the observables in our investigation. So we're looking now at the domain on the left side of the graph there. We're going to click the pivot arrow next to it, and we get a menu of various options. We can take response actions immediately. We can block this domain. It's got a neutral disposition, but I know it was involved in this attack. I'm going to block this domain right now. And it's done. That was the process of enrichment, where we pose a question into the SecureX threat response engine, and it then federates that request out to all of my participating technologies, who then reply with what they all know about each of the observables in the set. And then it literally draws a picture for us in that graph, as you saw. I can then choose to take response actions through SecureX threat response. Again, it will federate those out to the individual technologies responsible for enforcing those actions at those points. And because we have an API and because we have an automation engine, you can actually do this very rapidly at scale using those capabilities. Okay, so now we're going to talk about XDR for a minute. Is XDR yet another 3-letter acronym? And I mean, technically, yes, it is. But it's extended detection and response. And it's not just another technology. It's more of a design philosophy that brings together all of your components into a single architecture. Okay, it's that design philosophy of it shouldn't matter how you get the information or how you enforce the control. These are new ways of thinking of how data and functions should map to the workflow that the user needs to perform, not to the products and the user interfaces from which they came. To bring all of your technologies together holistically to protect that endpoint. Very rarely, if ever, has a security operator said, I wish I had yet another product I had to learn. We want multiple capabilities. We want to add capabilities to what we can do in the course of our jobs. We don't necessarily want to have another vendor, another manual that we're not going to read, another user interface that we have to learn how to traverse. We want to be able to get things done. And we shouldn't have to care which user interface we need to go to get that job done. So why do we need extended detection and response? Well, the endpoint agent only sees what the endpoint is going to see, right? Firewalls are only going to see what happens at the edge, what the firewalls see. The entirety of your stack, however, sees a lot more than that. We get intelligence generated from these control points and detection points on your endpoints, at the edge via your firewalls, via your DNS protection, email and web security proxies, and so on. What XDR does is put them all on the same team. Now, XDR is an acronym that was put together by Gartner, the analyst group, and this is what they have to say about it in a couple of different quotes from a couple of different Gartner sources. But what it boils down to is that an XDR can automatically collect and correlate data from multiple different security products to improve your threat detection and incident response capabilities. It's a unified security and incident response platform, and that integration occurs at the point of deployment. It's not something that's added in later. It's not an additional technology you have to buy to control them all, and it generally will provide better overall security outcomes as a result. Now, does any of that sound familiar? Because you may have heard of SIM, you may have heard of SOAR, And a SIM collects data from multiple systems into one central location and provides some level of correlation. A SOAR lets you leverage multiple security products at once. Both of those sound like they fit pretty well into parts of the XDR definition, but both of them are also expensive add-on items that have configuration and maintenance costs of their own. And from the initial descriptions of XDR, we see that integration occurs at the point of deployment, not added in later. So this is how to have or make an XDR. You have access to all the cross-product data, not necessarily hoard all the data, but the ability to access all the data. For a deeper dive into that you may or may not be interested in, there was a talk at SANS in January, Get Your Bits Together or Don't, that talks about the different data collection or not models that can be deployed to have this kind of a solution. It also gives you access to cross-product functions. The code that does these functions can be and will be in different products, but these products all have APIs. So you can gain access to those functions, to that intelligence over those APIs. And it's included in the products, integrated by design. Now, turning it up a notch, how to XDR even better. Make it really included in the products. Make it a built-in part of the licensing, not something you have to buy even as a license or an add-on item, another row in the PO. Make it a default part of the product experience like we've done with SecureX. Make it so the products can access the XDR, not just vice versa. So you have your XDR platform and it can access all the intelligence and all the capabilities of multiple of your different products. That's great. What if those products could gain value from participation in the XDR ecosystem by themselves having access to intelligence from other tools? What if your endpoint could know what the firewall had seen? What if the firewall could know what was happening on the endpoint? What if they could even leverage each other's response capabilities to some extent? The point products, in turn, then gain the combined functions, the combined intelligence of the rest of the deployed suite in that way. And as an added bonus, how about built-in automation? That's not talked about at all in the Gartner spec, but Cisco likes to be extra. Now, analysts invent acronyms, not technologies. Not to disparage our friends at Gartner or any other analyst group, but XDR was a term that was descriptive, not prescriptive. You're going to hear a lot, you've been hearing a lot of vendors running up and saying, I just made an XDR. No, probably not. Building an XDR takes time, it takes investment, it takes talent. We're on a journey that started in 2007 here at Cisco, and we've been acquiring best-of-breed solutions by buying best-of-breed companies and making those technologies work better together for over a decade now. SecureX is just the name for the most recent version of a project that I was with when we started it 3.5 years ago. And this is how you get to true XDR. Okay. We're going to talk about third-party integration improvements now. I'm going to run you through a little animation again. It's very similar to the last one, but just to reset the stage, your security operator poses a question to SecureX. SecureX has modules that talk to the different products, and that's how all of this works. And so that question goes into SecureX and is then federated out via the modules to the technologies that are then going to answer that question. The answer is proxied back through those modules. Then you get your pretty picture in the relations graph in SecureX. All of this happens inside SecureX infrastructure. Therefore, our engineers have to have built a module to talk to the product in question before that product can participate in this operation. But what if the modules did not have to live inside SecureX infrastructure? And the answer is they actually don't, because of relay modules. And so a relay module relies on a relay server. The module is kind of just a stub. It talks to this relay server. The relay server can live anywhere and handles the work of translating between the third-party data model and APIs into the Cisco Threat Intelligence data model and the SecureX APIs. And we have dozens of these already available in SecureX, and we have had them now for over a year. We also have this generic serverless relay that I want you to remember, because that's going to come up again. But the way this works is that these relay servers, the blue things, dark blue things, live outside of SecureX infrastructure. And there's a module in place that just talks to that relay server, which then in turn ferries, proxies, those requests and the responses back and forth to the main SecureX engine. Now, these are remote relays, so-called, because they're remote from the perspective of SecureX. They live outside of SecureX. And These inside, the ones inside the box, are hosted relays. These remote relays can live in a number of different places. They can live in a customer's cloud infrastructure. They can live in a customer's DMZ or physical infrastructure. They can live in the vendor's infrastructure, which is how a couple of our existing integrations work. The vendor just hosts that relay on behalf of the customers. To deploy one of these things, there's a number of steps. You download code from GitHub. You configure AWS if that's where you deploy it. You prepare your Python environment. You do a number of things, ending with configure the module settings in SecureX to talk to all of that you've stood up, and then it works. And you have these remote relays either hosted in your cloud or hosted in the vendor's cloud, and they become part of your SecureX operations. We've got the hosted relays inside the little box. And so the hosted relays and the remote relays all work in tandem to ferry these requests out to the different technologies and then bring the responses back. But what if they didn't have to? Because we have VirusTotal there at the bottom right, which is already an external service. It does not live in Cisco infrastructure whatsoever. It is not a Cisco product whatsoever, but you can get API keys from VirusTotal. And it all works internally without you having had to do any of that standing up over a remote relay. And so we can move these into the SecureX infrastructure, and then you no longer have to do all that. And the main installation steps then become, you just configure the module settings in SecureX. Everything else is off the table. You no longer have to do anything that. You click add new module, you put in your API keys or whatever, you click save, and it's done. So where these relays could live now also includes actually inside the SecureX infrastructure for your convenience. This is true now. I get to do this right after this happens, so I get to say it's true now. We have the following modules that are now Cisco hosted for third-party integrations that are currently shipped. In the next release in a couple of weeks, there's going to be another set that gets shipped. These can be configured in just a couple of minutes or less, and they immediately allow you to leverage third-party, open source, free or paid intelligence and response capabilities. Again, one of the perks of being a Cisco security customer is that even your third-party tools work better together as a result of SecureX and its availability because of the Cisco products that you've got. Are there any questions about that before we move on to orchestration workflows that have come out?
So who makes the call about what becomes Cisco hosted? So it sounds like there's an infrastructure for a customer or a third-party vendor to build their own based off of an API. And generally over time that may or may not happen. We've seen this, we offer APIs, which means we integrate with everybody, and then no one really integrates with it, and we're left with a tool that's really just proprietary. Right, you're bringing some of those modules in. I'm assuming that there's some code validation and verification to make sure that it's solid and does what needs to be done. So I'm assuming there's some gateway there. And what
there absolutely is. Yeah, so vendors can apply to be part of our ecosystem. There's a program called Cisco Security Technology Alliance that you can find out more about at cs.co/CSTA. And vendors can actually apply to be part of this ecosystem. And what that means is they get partnered up with an engineering team within Cisco who will help them write those modules, who will write those modules with them. And as part of that partnership, that module can then become, the relay for that module can then be hosted in our infrastructure, or sometimes the vendor opts to host it themselves, like I said. So there's this whole program around building this support. And that's why we've got dozens of these third-party integrations available now. The flip side is that because the APIs are open, anybody can write their own. Now, whether or not we can't make them write their own, but people already have. And actually, I took one of the existing ones off GitHub and modified it so that in my SecureX, I can pivot to a Google search because I'm lazy. But I mean, it took me about an hour to do that. It's that easy to build on the work that's already available via GitHub for anyone to freely download. So there's varying degrees of support. And the reason actually that I highlighted that one generic serverless relay module that you can still go and configure is because that's how you pick something. That's how you set something up to talk to a relay module that our team may not even be aware of. This goofy Google search thing that I didn't consult with our engineering teams before I did it. And I can set it up, and I called it unsupported third-party thing just to be kind of a smart aleck. But I mean, it's there to be built upon. Everything we're doing in SecureX is built from a model of how can we make a foundational layer that other people can then run with and do even better things. And this is one of those examples. We have code stubs up on GitHub. We have code examples. We have documentation all over the place. Here's how to write a relay module. Here's how the APIs in SecureX work. And then everyone's just free to go to the races with that. Or they can leverage any of, like I said, the dozens of bidirectionally supported third-party integrations that we already have available in the module store, as it were, in the collection of modules that you can just click add, API key, save, and you're done.
It's more of a general question than one one specific product, more about the ecosystem. There are lots of networks out there that can't reach out to the cloud, and I think one of your first slides talked about this being cloud native or hosted in the cloud, something like that. So whether it's medical networks or NERC SIP in the utility space or SCADA networks, do you have solutions to cover those types of environments? Because they still need to be secured. They might already have some inherent security to them, but they still need additional security. Do you have products and solutions for that in this ecosystem, what you're showing today?
Absolutely. I'm not going to say we have products because it's just part of SecureX. It's not another thing you have to buy. It is another thing you will have to download and install. However, we have a couple of different kinds of proxies that are available. We have a service called the Security Services Exchange, or SSE. I don't want to get too into the weeds of the technical, the way that it's laid out, the architectural diagrams or anything, but we do have solutions to exactly that type of problem. Because, of course, when you have a high secure environment, you might not want it reaching out to the cloud arbitrarily, but it does need to be able to talk to SecureX in some way. So if it's a 100% air-gapped network, then no, we don't have anything for that. But if you're just trying to control access very discreetly, very specifically, yes, we do have ways that those environments can still be leveraged via SecureX. Most people's email security appliances are internal, or they're on-premise. Most people's firewalls, obviously, on-premise. Varying degrees of connectivity to the network at large may be assigned for those resources. But in order to get them so that they can communicate to SecureX, so that they can be part of that SecureX-enabled suite of products, we do have, in a couple of different directions and for a couple of different use cases, tools that will make that possible in a secure fashion. Let's talk about orchestration workflows then for a minute. Now, orchestration is that automation and orchestration engine. We took a very low-code approach with this, and what we mean by that is that operators do not have to know how to code. This is not another programming language that they have to learn. They don't have to actually know any programming languages whatsoever. It is a very high-performance tool, but in order to set up these workflows, all you need to be able to do is select from a menu on the left and drag what you want out into your workspace and arrange it like a flowchart. Once you've got the flowchart perfectly configured, congratulations, that's actually your program. You're done. And we also include many out-of-the-box playbooks that were built by Cisco engineers on my team and on other teams throughout the company. We're making these workflows and then publishing them, and you can just import them, because at the end of the day, after all that dragging and dropping and making the flowchart, after that's done, what's produced is a text file. And those can be shared in any way that you can share text files, which we've been working on in this industry for a number of decades now. So anything that you can do that with will work. Write it down on a napkin, throw it at somebody, I don't care. You can import them from other sources. You can export them to other sources. Maybe your ISAC has a collection of orchestration workflows that it shares. Maybe you're participating in a vendor relationship of some kind that provides orchestration workflows. It doesn't matter to us. You can import them. You can share them with trusted recipients. You can import them from trusted sources. You can just drag and drop them around in the interface, and you can, of course, write your own using those tools that I mentioned and everything else that you've got that is SecureX capable. Now, in the orchestration engine, we've also got support for dozens and dozens of third-party tools of various kinds. We've got event-based and intent-based automation triggers. So you can have a workflow kickoff because you went to the interface and selected the workflow and clicked run this one now. Or you can have it run in response to certain states in your network. When this happens, do the following things. Or you can have a calendar. When it's 0 o'clock, it's dark 30, do this series of steps. And you can have approval built into these, by the way. If you're scared by the idea of an automated workflow running away and doing things without supervision, you can have supervisory steps built in so that one of your operators is going to get a message on their phone and they have to click approve before the rest of the workflow will continue. And you get visibility into the workflows and the status of their execution. How did this thing run? Did it fail? If it failed, on what step? Did I get a warning? It won't even let you try to run something until certain parameters are met. So there's like built-in code quality control into the engine. And you can look back in history and say the last 5 times that this one ran, what happened? And get all that information. And it can communicate with both cloud and on-premise assets through a remote module, which is one of the technologies I was just mentioning in the answer to the previous question. We do have a remote module for orchestration so that you can safely and securely leverage on-premise assets to be part of these orchestrations. Now, going to go through a couple of examples of recent workflows. We've got one that's meant to handle the task of doing phishing investigations, or at least beginning those investigations. So that's your user. Your user has been educated. When you get an email user and it looks a little bit sketchy for whatever reason, you forward it off to our phishing investigation email inbox. So your user does that. And then there's automation that picks up that message and runs off and does things that right now your humans are taking their time to do. We're going to receive the email. We're going to process all the attachments to that email. We're going to check reputations for all observables, the sender of the email, the domain it came from, any URLs that are in it, any domains that are in it, any files that are attached to it. We're going to make a verdict based on all those dispositions. And if it's known to be malicious, we send a message to the user thanking them for participating appropriately in the security process, alerting the user, like, don't open this, go ahead and delete this email, alerting the SOC, creating a SecureX incident in the incident manager. If it's only suspicious or if it's unknown, then we alert the SOC that, hey, this is a message that there was no obvious low-hanging fruit in, but your user thinks is malicious or suspicious, so go ahead and begin your investigative process now, but we've done the first tedious time-consuming parts for you. And that's how this works. There's a variety of kinds of emails that end up in most companies' phishing investigation inboxes, ranging from very interesting to not actually all that interesting. And they all go to a person. What this workflow does is take the bulk of that away, because the low-hanging fruit is actually fairly easy to detect using the above process. It's a time-consuming process, especially without SecureX. But it doesn't require a ton of skill. And so our automation takes all of that off the plate so that your human analysts can focus on the more interesting and often more malicious emails that fly under the radar of that first obvious series of steps. That's the phishing investigation workflow. It's triggered off of the receipt of an email into an email inbox that you configure in the workflow. This is the inbox you're going to watch. And then it takes care of that portion, a large portion, of the manual labor involved in manning that or attending to that inbox. The other one I want to talk about is the URL to threat grid workflow. So threat grid is our malware analysis engine. And in many cases, analysts have need to submit a URL to the malware analysis engine so that it will spin up a VM and it will browse to that URL and will record everything that happens to the system as a result of having gone to that URL. That's what it does. That's what it's for. It's fairly straightforward. So your user comes across a malicious URL or suspicious looking URL for whatever reason. The automation then grabs that URL, runs off to ThreatGrid. ThreatGrid does the analysis. The automation comes back with the report. That's what it does. It verifies that what it got handed is in fact a URL. If so, it submits it to ThreatGrid via the ThreatGrid API, and then it provides the report link to the analyst. Why do we put all this in an orchestration workflow? It's not that complicated a series of events, because now we can add it to the threat response menus. You give it a category of response. You set up these two variables that are required. What kind of observable is it being fed? What is the value of that observable? Once you have those three things in place, it then shows up in your response menus. So when I'm looking at a URL in the graph, I have the option of submitting that URL to ThreatGrid for analysis right there in threat response in SecureX. And so that's how you can add to this drop-down list of capabilities you have on every object in the graph or elsewhere in the user interface. You can add your own to this using SecureX orchestration. Are there any questions about orchestration or any of the features of orchestration that I've highlighted in the course of going through these two example workflows that were recently published? All right, thank you very much. I'm going to leave you with some resources for additional learning and a little bit of a tie-up, because the bottom line is that coordinating multiple sensors and multiple defensive capabilities, what it does is it reduces your mean time to respond. It reduces your adversary dwell time, and it reduces the amount of time your enemies have to play around in your playground. It reduces the likelihood of a breach, and if there is a breach, it reduces the severity of that breach because you're able to get on it sooner before they have the chance to do the amount of damage they came here to do. We get quotes from customers all the time like this one. I'm able to visualize threats within my environment and take action in half the time it used to take me, a 50% reduction in MTTR. And what that means, of course, is a 100% increase in what that team gets done. Because like I said at the beginning, they're not sitting around for the 50% of the time that they saved. We really believe that the security solutions you buy from us and from anybody else should empower you to investigate threats faster, to respond to those threats faster. Automation should be built in and intuitive. It should reduce the burden on the SOC, not add expense, not add expertise that's required. Security products and threat intelligence should all work together within those categories, but more importantly, security products and threat intelligence as broad categories. Those two categories should also work together to help you solve your problems faster, to make it easier and also faster to investigate threats. Some resources you can use to learn more about SecureX. Well, starting with the most basic, cisco.com/go/SecureX. That's where we're going to find the best introductory materials, some demo videos, some links for additional information there as well to get introduced to SecureX, what it's for, why it does the things that it does, and what those things are and how it does them. You can see videos. If you're not yet tired of my voice, go to this link, cs.co/SecureX_videos, for a YouTube playlist of videos about SecureX, including demos, configuration guides, best practices, example use cases, all kinds of information there in the videos. There's also SecureX_ESG, so cs.co/SecureX_ESG. That is a recently published white paper by, I believe, the Enterprise Security Group that talks about SecureX and how it fills the XDR niche and then some, and how our third-party integrations are actually a huge value pillar for that. And then if you really want to get into it, developer.cisco.com/SecureX is the DevNet section all about SecureX, where it will tell you about the APIs. There's some exercises, some tutorials. You can learn about the APIs. You can learn more about orchestration and workflows, more about the data model and so on. And then the last thing I'm going to list, but not the last thing you should do, security.cisco.com, which is where you can go to actually use SecureX. If you have any Cisco security product that is SecureX capable and you're not using SecureX, you're missing out. You're missing out on value that you've already paid for. So I definitely encourage you to go there, create an account, and get started. And if you want to get started without creating an account, you can get SecureX in the classroom, obviously a virtual classroom at this time, but we have multiple global threat hunting workshops that will run you through the tools. You can get hands on the capabilities in a lab environment. You can see attacks without having had to have any of your own. And we have SecureX featured heavily in that educational material. There's a link, there's a QR code at top right. You can go there and get the chance to get a hands-on guided demo by experts where you will use it yourself and learn how it could be operationalized in your own environments. That wraps up everything I had to share with you folks today. I greatly appreciate your time and your interest. And once again, if there's any questions I can address before I tune over the microphone, I'm more than happy to. Thank you.
Yeah. Hey, Ben, I've got a quick question for you. First off, great presentation. I really enjoyed it. Second of all, for companies that don't operate their own SOC, is this something that you would see as complementary to a vSOC, or as a replacement for a vSOC, or a reduction in what you would consume from a vSOC with SecureX? I'm just curious about that.
There's a couple of different models that can be deployed in from a business perspective. We have MSSP partners who will effectively, they use SecureX on behalf of their customers the way they already use the rest of that customer's security tools on that customer's behalf. And so SecureX just becomes a way that they can gain efficiency doing the security work for their customers. We also have another model where SecureX is something the customer uses, but the MSSP partner is somebody they can call in if they have questions, or who will take over in the case of a serious breach. I mean, there's various different points on that scale. It's not even a series of options. It's very much a analog scale of customer involvement and how much do they want to be hands-on tools themselves versus how much do they want to outsource to a partner organization. And SecureX can play at pretty much every level of that model.
Awesome. Thank you.